Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig. Dyan Liora's journey to becoming a voice for truth and spiritual sovereignty has been anything but conventional. Born in the Philippines and raised Catholic, she quickly grew disillusioned with organized religion and began searching for something deeper, something more meaningful. Her path led her through yoga, Kundalini practices, and eventually to Islam for a while, immersing herself in spiritual and countercultural communities for a time in the Amazon jungle, with living with hippie in a hippie commune. Diane said through her journey, she finally understood the Sioux Native American saying, "The longest journey you will make in your life is from your head to your heart." Surrounded by anti Zionist voices, she adopted similar views by default, never imagining that her perspective would later shift so dramatically. A pivotal moment came, however, during a deeply emotional conversation that she was witness to with an Israeli man, and he broke down in tears as he was challenged by many other people about his Zionist views. The moment sparked a wave of cognitive dissonance that led her to begin researching the history of Israel and the Middle East conflict. As she studied the origins of the state of Israel and watched hundreds of interviews between Israelis and Palestinians, the narrative she had long believed began to unravel. Gradually, her perspective flipped. She began to see Israel not as an aggressor she had once assumed, but as a small nation of a few million Jews living under constant threat in a hostile region. Living in Mexico during the events of October 7th, Diane watched with shock as many of her friends online posted extreme anti Israel rhetoric and even celebrated violence against them. In that moment, she felt as though her entire life journey, her spiritual search, her curiosity about truth, and her willingness to question dominant narratives had prepared her to speak out. Today Diane is a quantum healer who helps people break free from limiting belief systems and energetic imprints that keep them trapped in cycles of suffering. Her research based content also addresses the growing tendency among some activists to conflate the Palestinian cause with indigenous struggles in the United States, highlighting the historical inaccuracies that arise when distinct histories are merged through ideological projection. While Diane's outspoken views have led to social media suspensions with significant backlash, they have also drawn strong support from those seeking clearer, more nuanced discussions about Israel and Jewish identity. She's traveled to Israel twice and seen there a multicultural society where women move freely, speak openly, and participate fully in public life. Through Diane's work, she hopes to create space for truth, independent thinking, and ultimately greater understanding. Diane is a quantum alchemist and a soul sovereignty guide, serving those looking for a little magic in this world. Ladies and gentlemen, Dyan Liora.
Thank you. That was an amazing introduction.
You think it sums it up, who you are?
Yeah, really well.
Do you think you have a good handle of who you are at this time in your life?
I think so. I mean, that's the whole process of living life. When you come to a point of awareness, is like knowing who you are, who you really are. Because there's like conditioning, there's like, social, cultural factors. And ultimately, it comes down to who you really are, like underneath, and what you're made of, what you're meant to do.
You like who you are?
I do. After years of self-hatred.
Yeah, we've all gone through it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's an initiation.
Well, what do you like about yourself, Diane?
I would say, I love healing people.
Yeah.
I come from a web development background, and I really liked debugging like troubleshooting code websites, like bugs, but that later translated into debugging people. Like I'm able to find like systems to debug the mind, the energy body, the emotional body, and even physical things, right? Because there's different layers to our being. Um, and so that's what I really like, is that I love to solve problems,
Mhm.
like problems that aren't so apparent. Is I feel like, well, that's what I'm good at. That's what I also like about myself, because I feel like it's helpful. It makes me feel good when I do it. So
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. That when you do something you're passionate about, there's a really good chance you're going to be good at it, and
yeah,
what comes out of that is a greater sense of self and satisfaction, and often happiness. Right?
exactly, exactly. That's succinctly put. So, I mean, that's why I do what I do. I don't overthink it. I just follow what I'm good at and what I'm naturally drawn to, and everything else follows.
So I want to walk through your life a little bit,
Hmm.
ultimately ending up with your support for Israel and the Jewish people, because that means an awful lot to me, and it means an awful lot to my people. Um, but so people can have a better understanding of who you are. You were born in the Philippines, and
Hmm.
really by definition, that mostly means you're going to be Catholic, and you were, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And you grew up in that environment, but for some reason, the noise of Catholicism, if you will, didn't resonate with you. It wasn't
Mhm.
satisfying enough. Why was that? What was lacking?
Well, I feel like when you're inundated into a particular belief system, especially when you're younger, I don't know, for some people, they stick with it. For some people, they break out of it, or it just doesn't do anything for them. Like, they're still unhappy, they're still suffering, they're still going through cycles of whatever, right? And loops of whatever. And it's like, isn't religion supposed to be the container for which you heal your spirit? And I just didn't receive that from Catholicism. Obviously, when I grew up, it was like very rigid. I was told to sit in the pew, not say a word, so I was very contained, and that's just I'm allergic to that. I would say. I didn't. I grew up in the Philippines until I was about 7, and then I transplanted to the U.S. But one thing to note that I remember vividly, this is where it kind of started. The in the Philippines, so they're not like it's not like Roman Catholicism in Europe, where it's a more established practice. So in the Philippines, because it was colonized by Spain, they kind of have like a very fragmented version of Catholicism, anyways, because it's just like that's not the origin, right? And so I remember thinking that the enemy of Jesus was Judas. And in my mind, in my Filipino mind, I connected that to Jews. So this is where it kind of like that's where the foundation was laid, that Judas was the one who betrayed Jesus, and it it correlated to the word Jews, like Jewish,
Yes,
Judean, because there
yes.
was it's phonetically similar. And of course, we don't know the nuances of religion when you're immersed in a religion in a foreign country that was colonized by a particular religion. It's not going to be the same. Like, you're not going to have the same kind of education behind all of what the purpose of the religion is. You're just told to pray the rosary this way. There's no reasoning, there's no study behind it. You're just like being told what to do and what to follow. um, and so when I moved to the US, that stronghold of the religion and the culture obviously dispersed because it's so multicultural in the US. But I was in Southern California, and I was still hanging on to my Catholicism until I was about 18, when I was still going to church. I really tried to like it. I would go as an adult, even just to like sit there and see and observe like what I could learn, but my soul was just like wanting more. And so that's when I started exploring the concept of Buddhism, like, and then I found yoga, and I got into that for quite a while because I felt like I benefited from a lot of the practices at first.
It's interesting because you said when you got into yoga, you pursued it as though your life depended on it,
Hmm. It
right?
did because I was going through, like I said, I was a web developer and I was, I had a really great job. I had a really great home. I was in one of the safest suburbias in the US. But something was missing. And one day I just got really sick of it because I realized I had some kind of depression running in the background. It was like a voice that was like, I want to die every single day. But I just ignored it because I'm like, you know what? I'm living the life. Why do I have? I just wasn't self aware as I am now. So I didn't know what these voices meant or what these beliefs were. And one day I just had enough and I was like, no, I want more spiritual friends. I want more, I just said that. And all of a sudden my life turned upside down. I was going through some kind of crisis, and then when I found yoga, it was the only thing that was like helping me get out of my head, and bring the awareness back into my body, my breathing. And so I learned about all of these different aspects that I've been ignoring for so long. I wasn't taught to pay attention to these aspects of myself.
Diane, you said that the depression that you suffered, excuse me, you said that it was one of those where you didn't know what was happening behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Is that what you meant just a moment ago when you said myself? I didn't have that self awareness enough so that I
Yeah,
understood again the noises type of thing in your
yeah.
head, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that most people in the Western societies, especially, they feel this kind of depression. They feel these anxieties arise, and um, but they use they turn to medication right away to suppress. Well, not suppress. I can't speak for the reasons why they do it, but in my view, I've never taken that route because I felt like it was something more internal, like something spiritual. I call it a psycho spiritual disease. And so I began to look into how to heal myself. And that was my primary motivator. Like, I was like, why do I feel this way? And so I'm going to look outside of myself to seek out, these healing modalities, whether it's like Reiki, learning about the chakra system, like learning how to connect the mind and body and heart and all of these things. So, yeah, I just, yeah, I just wasn't self-aware enough to realize that there was something deeply wrong. And I'm not saying like my way is the right way or the only way. I know other people have their own journeys, and they can go through whatever they need to go through to to get to their goal of not feeling like crap. But that's just,
Which really is the bottom line, isn't it? You just don't want to feel badly. I know.
yeah,
What's interesting I find in my research about you and your life is there's very little mention of your family.
yeah.
And I'm always curious about when someone is going through such deep conflict as you were, where were your mom and dad with this? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I always kind of felt like the black sheep of the family. And
Yeah.
so I never really, and that was part of the healing too, because I mean, it was a dysfunctional family. I mean, my parents are still together. But it was, these are the things that I felt I couldn't just bring up to them because, one, the language barrier. I spoke English and I learned these other concepts that they I would have no idea about. And so I had no one to turn to except for really myself, my self-sufficiency, and looking to other people for help.
Mhm.
So, my parents kind of served as, the I ended up returning to what I call like ancestral healing down the line. So first you heal yourself, then the ancestral stuff starts to come up. It's just kind of a natural progression. And you start to see the patterns like, oh, the reason why I'm like this is because I see this pattern in my family too. And so they definitely got looped back into the mix. Like they were there in the background, but more as, they served more as like a trigger point rather than a support system. um and my parents, they, as I progressed in my healing journey too, they actually evolved along with me, if that makes sense. Like, I can now speak to my parents about these things, whereas before I couldn't, because there were so many layers between us, like resentment and blame and the guilt, unexpressed anger. So all of this stuff just, you know um it it promotes the separation, like this invisible veil.
It can, right?
Yeah.
So, are your parents, would you say, were they or are they intellectuals at all? Are they readers? Are they people who sort of
No.
pursued life with right? So, hence the challenge, right? They had a very particular way of thinking, right?
Yeah, yeah, they were just concerned about survival, like, keeping and that for that I'm really grateful for, and that's what I really needed was, like, the stability and, like, material survival, like, just having them providing the roof over my head and, like, financial help. I think that helped. Like, it really helped raise me. I can't complain about that at all. They never really, abused me outright, or it wasn't like that. But they were pretty much not like, I just didn't have that communication channel open with them where I can tell them about my journey and what I was going through, even though they witnessed it. They witnessed all of the phases I went through and they thought, man, she must be really crazy.
Mhm.
Like,
Must be nuts. Yeah,
yeah.
right. I had a similar thing with my parents. I also there was no room for talk about it. And by the way, just recently I started reading extensively about forgiveness
Oh.
because I'm 65 years old and I've had a very difficult relationship with my father who passed away at 61 in
Mm,
1989, and I never quite worked it through.
mm,
But I can honestly say at this point in time, I forgive him. I forgive him, and I've let
yeah.
go of the anger. And part of that, I'm sure this has been part, is
Uh-huh.
understanding the life that he had and the difficulties he had, and therefore the conflicts that were never corrected through his parents' lives, and
Mhm.
therefore passed on to him, and then passed on to
Yeah,
me. Right?
that's ancestral healing 101 right there. Like, you start to
101, yes,
see
101.
patterns. Yeah, and you get to understand, like, where the understanding is like the first step. Awareness, understanding, and then you can work through it with forgiveness, and gratitude even, you know?
Yes.
So,
You said through all your work, you've dealt with your inner child
mhm,
healing,
mhm,
shadow work, entity extraction,
mhm,
sort of slash exorcism, past life regression. I'm curious about the inner child part.
mhm.
As you studied yourself, as you looked deeply inside, and you found that inner child inside of you, who were you as a child?
Oh, I mean, when you call up your inner child in your mind's eye, usually the first vision that you see, what you can observe first off, the top of your imagination, is how does she look? Like, does she look, repressed? Does she look like she can't does she look stifled? So that was my inner child. She showed up as somebody whose expression was severely blocked, and like I said, because of my Catholic rigid upbringing, that was part of it. Where I couldn't just speak my mind. I had to just, like, stay quiet, and I couldn't, everything that I did was wrong. It was mostly my uncle who raised me, so I can't blame my parents for that. Especially in the early impressionable stages of my life before 7 years old. And so I had a lot of traumas regarding expression. And
Yes.
can you imagine now? Like, I had to work through that for decades to be able to even speak to you right now, like, on this podcast. So, yeah, it was, that was my inner child, somebody who, you know, the way I see it is like all of our inner children represents our innocence. And that's the incorruptible part of the soul, which I call the core of the soul, like the core battery. So that's usually when I get to the inner child layers, like in a session, for example, that's I get really excited because I'm like, wow, we're getting to the core of something here. And that's, when we heal those like fragmented aspects of ourselves, you can really feel the shift. Like, it makes you stronger within. Like, it's just more, there's just more harmony because there's not that inner child who's like crying for help constantly in your subconscious, so that's why I go after I go to the inner child work first and cultivate that and heal it enough so that when I ask again, imagine your inner child, are they smiling now? Are they like embodying joy? So that's the goal for inner child work, is
Are there
taking
are
those
there
little pieces.
is the inner child external Do you see that inner child as being external to you? In other words, an almost like
Yeah.
another person, or have you been able to sort of integrate today with then?
Yeah, so that's the idea. The inner child process. At first, it depends. Some people will recall an inner child memory through first person, or they see it in third person. So that also matters. There's a nuance to that. But the idea is, if you're experiencing it firsthand, that means, I mean, in first person, it's more like it's operating in your conscious mind, and then when you're experiencing it on the third person, it's more of like an observer. So there's
Right, right.
there's a distinct way of going around to heal that. um so I mean, it is, the way I see it, it's internal. The inner child is internal, but usually the pattern that it's holding gets expressed externally, and they show up in our relationships and our interactions with people. And are we reactive? Are we, when we get criticized, do we react from a certain place? And that's probably rooted from inner child wounds of being criticized as a child constantly. So there's all kinds of it's usually like a mirror, like whatever reality you're experiencing, especially in the patterns that you're experiencing in your personal reality, usually is reflected within the inner child.
Okay. Along the journey, we're going to
Mhm,
make a left along the road that you're on, and then a right, and here you find something which is called alchemy.
mhm,
And I want to explain to the viewer and the listener what that is. Alchemy is an ancient tradition
mhm,
that mixed early on chemistry, philosophy, and mysticism, which is fascinating. It was practiced in places like ancient Egypt, the Islamic world, India, China, and medieval Europe. The main goal of alchemy, alchemists are usually trying to achieve three famous things: turn base metal into gold.
mhm,
They believe metals like lead could be transformed into gold through a special substance, create the philosopher's stone, a legendary
mhm,
material that could supposedly turn metals into gold and grant wisdom and sometimes even give immortality.
mhm.
Boy, that's complex. Can you simplify it for us?
Yeah, I'll simplify it for you because I view that as medieval alchemy. Alchemy itself derives from, I think, Arabic, al chemy, but I just use the term alchemy because it's it's symbolic to the transformation of the lead of the ego to the gold of the soul. So I use it in energetic terms.
Mhm.
And the first time I experienced it, actually, it wasn't Kundalini yoga. They were, at the end game, because when I play, when I don't mean to say play, when I get into these modalities, I really go hardball. Like I'm really like I'll get to the end game, whatever it
You're
is.
serious about it.
I'm
Yeah.
serious about it. It's like the
Yeah.
Olympics. And so when I was in Kundalini yoga, they got to the point of polishing the heart. You attend for years, and suddenly you're presented with the modality that is supposed to, help you, right? You learn the basics first, and then you get to play with these like more advanced concepts and polishing the heart. But I felt like it was lacking something. And as soon as I said that, as soon as I felt that, I had seen someone do the Islamic prayer, and I was like, that looks like yoga. And so that piqued my interest. Turns out they were a Sufi, and that led me to Sufism. And also, I became a super Muslim, like in terms of a super Sufi, like a Sufi, like, Muslims pray 5 times a day. I prayed 10. Like I did the, optional prayers. I did meditations, like Sufi meditations. I was just on that rug, like constantly purifying my body, my vessel, like just completely nerding out on this. And they had something called light alchemy. And so the Sufi healing method is like they take a thing and then they recite the names of God, the names of Allah towards it, and some other incantations. But that was the very first time I felt some kind of movement, like in my own heart. I felt it crack open, like as if a plaque had just like been cleaned out.
Mhm.
So they call this light alchemy, and I decided, you know what, at the end of it, I felt like Islam, I hit a roadblock with Islam as well, because I asked them, what if I don't want a house of pearls? Like, what if I don't feel like this is, satisfying enough, like this afterlife scenario that you're giving me. And nobody could answer my question. And that's when I knew I had to leave. And so when I left Islam, I was led to another kind of initiation, which was completely, it had, it was not yoga, it was not Islam, it was like my own soul's journey. And this led me to discover what alchemy really was. It was like looking, and what Carl Jung's work, I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
Carl Jung, but
Mhm.
anything that he writes or says, I'm like, yeah, that's it. Like, he knew. I had never read a Carl Jung book before in my life, but everything that I come to discover in my own journey is reflective of his work. So it's, taking, the shadows and bringing light into it. This is alchemy. Because once you pay attention to something, like you become aware of something, you pay attention to it, energy starts to shift. It's kind of like in quantum mechanics. The particle isn't doing anything until it's observed, and then it'll start to move. And if you can understand that, there's a lot of power in that. And so I started going into, like, it took me maybe 10 years to just like go through this initiation, learning about like these different parts of myself, like what is the shadow self, what is the inner child, what are these ancestral themes, like all kinds of things would come up. So I discovered a lot here. And so I realized that all of these things that make up our psyche, everything can be transformed because you can heal anything from accessing any single particle. Again, coming back to quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics. Yeah.
Yes. So that's kind of how I discovered alchemy. So it's a different, it's metaphoric from what they used to do, like literally transform gold, lead into gold. But I remember, actually, I'm going back as a child. I remember I was sitting there by myself. I was isolated a lot. So I used to color. And I thought, I'm going to rub orange and yellow together and see what happens. And when I did that for, I don't know what was, maybe 30 minutes of heating up the crayons together, it turned to gold. Like, I remember gold flaking out of the, so it's kind of symbolic, right? Like that I became what I call a quantum alchemist. And I had already been doing that as a child. It was like a precursor.
So I want to talk about that inquisitive nature and why some people stay where they are their entire lives mostly, or don't move very much, let's say, and other people actually make quantum adjustments. So from my understanding, there's three things that help a person to see the world differently than they might have for the first number of years of their life. One is new knowledge or awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Learning something that changes how you interpret reality can shift your worldview. As an example,
Mm-hmm.
studying psychology or philosophy, right? An example is when I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Mm-hmm.
Like many people, that changed my awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? The second thing is powerful life experiences. Major events often reshape how someone views life. Example, loss, trauma, illness, or becoming a parent. In my case, I have a son. Thank God he's almost 20 years old. And I have always said that my life wasn't enough just having me in it. And
Yeah.
when my son came along, there was somebody outside of me that I gave my heart to. And that just changed things dramatically for me. And then the third thing is deep self reflection.
Mm-hmm.
When people start questioning their beliefs, identity, and purpose, their worldview can shift. This can come from practices, as you've spoken about, meditation, therapy, journaling, spiritual exploration like Kundalini yoga. Some people do Kabbalah, mysticism, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Why do some people, Diane, go through this whole process and have the courageous and the bravery to let go of, let's say, Jesus
Mm-hmm.
and dive into Buddhism? And other people say, this is it. This is how I was born. This is how I'm staying. My mother, my father, my grandparents were like this, and I'm satisfied with that. Why are some people like this? Some people like that.
I would just say different soul journeys, you know. Some people, what I would call younger souls. Some people are younger souls, and they need a particular life path to fulfill. And that's resonant enough for them to stay in one path. But there are people who are what I call bigger souls. I don't like to put age in souls because that's not how it really works. There's small, I would say, smaller souls and bigger souls, souls that have accumulated more energy more
Yeah.
um more in their spiritual DNA. And so I would say that's what sparks, exploration, more exploration, because once you expand, the universe expands, right? Once you expand, it's like it's limitless. Like once you discover that. So I feel like once the little soul gains more soul experience, just like what you said, it's kind of like there's a soul level aspect to what you were saying. So once it gains more experience, once it learns more, it's going to keep expanding, want to expand. This is just my theory, but I can't explain to you what, I mean, it's also free will, right? There's also free will, like, but you can't make a person pick up a book and read something interesting. It's like they have to do it in their own volition for it to be authentic. So,
I mean, there's other aspects of sort of finding your truth,
mm,
and embracing it, even if it's different than the truth from yesterday. As an example, you need evidence, right?
mhm,
What proof supports your new belief? It has to be consistent. In other
yeah,
words, does this belief predict other things that I know to be true? And then thirdly, testability. Could this belief be proven wrong? Now, let's take this into the practical. You were brought up in an environment where people were not that friendly to the Jewish people, let's say.
mhm. Yeah, perfect. Because
Many
I
of them,
wanted to bring that up
yeah, I mean, this is
as an
where I want to go
example.
with
Yeah,
the interview.
yeah.
They became anti-Zionists, and
Hmm.
therefore that worldview was something that you digested and
Hmm.
you accepted it, and until you were in a commune with a bunch of hippies. I think it
Hmm.
was in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And
This was in Peru. Yeah.
this was in Peru, and
Hmm.
you saw this discussion going on with this man who was a Zionist, who was an Israeli, and there were people around him that were really pushing him hard about his beliefs until he started to cry.
Hmm.
And you said this is one of the finest human beings that you had ever met,
Yeah.
and that moment was pivotal for you. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Okay. So, the spiritual communities. Where can I start? So, there's something in the spiritual communities where it's being parroted that the Zionists control the world. Because if you're a seeker of truth, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in that world, believe it or not, seekers of truth.
Yes, I know.
And they end up going into these rabbit holes that just, blame the Jews for everything. And so I fell into that trap as well. Because when you're in those circles, you're encouraged to, um, it's kind of clicky also. Like you're just encouraged to accept certain beliefs without questioning it. And the right side of the brain, the intuitive part of the brain, is cultivated while the logic and reason are demonized. And so there's no balance. Immediately, there's an imbalance for people to think like logically, like, hey, maybe I need to research this a little bit more. There's none of that. It's just like whatever the coolest guy says is what you might adopt. This is how it happens. And so I was, when I was in the jungle, I had already held these beliefs. I was an anti-Zionist, not actively, obviously, but I mean, in my worldview, I was taught that Zionists ruled the world and that they were responsible for like owning the banks and whatever, like all of that stuff. Um, but it didn't, and the man didn't identify as a Zionist. He was just Israeli, a Jew who was proud of his Jewish roots. He didn't even outright say he was a Zionist. But we all know that today means Zionist just means Jew. It's just like a recycled word. Back then in Europe it was Jew, now it's Zionist. So he was cornered by, these people who were like me, who were just like, no, Jews rule the world. They're like evil. And then he's standing there and I'm seeing him. I mean, he is kind of like, he really a pure soul. And I see him break down and cry. And when I saw that, it really like, it was like my whole world just like shattered. Like, what is going on? Something isn't right. And that's the cognitive dissonance. It was like what I was seeing in reality didn't reflect the ideological beliefs. And so that's when I started asking, what's the origin of Israel? Because I had no idea. I had to start from scratch. I was just told that Israel was an oppressor state, that, all the things that come with it. And so once I started learning about the history of Israel, and this is why I make content the way I do with historical facts in it, is because people don't know. They had no idea that, the Arab nations attacked Israel in its inception and etc. Like, they had no idea about what had happened, these agreements. And I even know like the nuances of like why the early Zionists gave the keys to Jerusalem to the Hashemite kingdom. I also know that bad chess move, like there's all these intricacies. And that's just because I was like curious, and I don't, expect people to listen to what I say and be like, yeah, that's right. I encourage people to really like seek it out for themselves and not just like follow what I say. But the reason why I speak out is because my wish is to inspire that, at least. Even if I'm a little harsh in my videos, sometimes like, if a dog is misbehaving, you tell them no in a harsh voice and they'll understand it. So that's how I kind of approach things. I'm just like, you can't just be nice all the time and just be like logical. It's like you have to speak their language, if that makes sense. Like, going back to what I was saying. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. And I just want to sort of encourage what you're saying is you through your research, you started to discover that Israel, I think at that time, had 7 or 8 million people. And while everybody was saying that Israel, the Zionists, is, destroying the Middle East and the world, in fact, you saw otherwise. You saw that the Arab nations were actually bullying Israel.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you made 2 trips to Israel, and you made a very interesting statement. You said, I was there and I saw great multiculturalism,
Mhm.
and I saw women had as many rights as men, and they were involved in the growth of the country,
Mhm.
their lives. They could travel freely if they wanted to.
Mhm.
And you said, I couldn't quite figure out where people were coming up with their ideas, the idea of an apartheid state. I couldn't figure it out. So
Mm.
you found some evidence and you applied it and you changed your thinking, but some people can't.
Yeah, because of the ideological framework that they're operating. Like, it's kind of the way cults work. Like, there's really nothing you can say to them to convince them otherwise. Um, and that's how it was with me. It's like it becomes part of your identity. And so when you confront people of what their identity has latched onto, it's gonna be like fighting tooth and nail for it. So the idea is to just keep showing these things, because there are some who might change your minds. I do get emails from people or messages that tell me, hey, you know what, thank you for speaking up, I had no idea about this, I'm learning a lot. you know and so those people who are also curious, who have that spirit of curiosity and learning, they're the ones that will really resonate with the stuff I put out there. um but as far as like changing the minds of people who don't want to change because of free will, once again, um they're just going to remain that way until something else comes along to teach them
Diana,
something else.
as you changed and you put your stuff out there, you said that certainly in the beginning was extraordinarily painful to see the
Hmm.
vile responses to your
Hmm.
message. And most Jews that I hang around with, they go through that on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
We have rallies right outside my door here where I hear these awful things, epithets hurled at the Jewish people right on the corner here every single Sunday. And it's deeply, deeply disturbing. But I grew up on that, and I understand it. But you said the turning point where things started to get better was when you started to get support from the pro-Israel side, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it definitely helped because I mean, I lost all my friends also. My, my, and it was a blessing that all my accounts got suspended across the board because I had to start over
Yeah.
again.
Like
And I mean,
YouTube
it was,
and X and Spotify and all that,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah, like Instagram and Facebook mostly where I was interfacing. Those were lifelong accounts that I had, like 20 years in the making, but it was infested with anti-Semites because of the journey and path that I had taken. Of course, naturally, I would add people from those journeys, and they were, I would say, 80% anti-Semitic. Like that's how high it was. And so, any content that I would put out, it's like they would just art, like it just was a drain on energy, too, to like engage with those people. Like, wow, like they, this October 7th really like shone the shine the light on the roaches to come out of the dark. Like that's what it felt like. Like I was like, whoa, now that I have this newfound realization about the Jewish people and I'm seeing it for the first time as an outsider of, of that ideological lens, I'm able to see all of this like, wow, I used to be that way. And it was an interesting reflection for sure. I know every single Jewish conspiracy theory there is. And so I've walked the Muslim path. I know what it's like to be in the spiritual community. So it's like I know what it's like firsthand to be in their heads. And so yeah, this was an important part of it too, is like getting the support of the Jewish people. It's I can't even say with words what it feels like to be on this side. I call it the winning side because as history shows, the Jewish people always win some way, somehow. Um, yeah, and it's just like it's been a journey, and I just feel like I love all the Jewish people that I meet. Like that, like I just sense because I have such a strong sense, like intuitive sense, um, a more in-depth perception than most people. I can really feel like the strength of the Jewish people, and to me, I'm in awe of it. The innovativeness, the persistence, the resilience. Resilience is a big word, and something that I like discovered myself in interfacing with more Jewish people than I ever imagined I would in my life. Um, it's that they have like what I call the creator template. Okay. And so I discovered this actually by when I was teaching a workshop on like Chapman's drama triangle. It's like this upside down triangle, kind of like the Palestine, the symbol that they use, the emoji, the upside down red triangle.
Mm.
There's this like the victim, perpetrator, and
Yeah.
martyr loop that people, yeah. So and I was like, wait a minute, because I'm such a curious person. I'm like, I'm going to turn this upside down, and it formed the Star of David. So I was like, this is the empowerment triangle, and I started to see. I was like, this is why the Jewish people were able to survive the Holocaust and then go to Israel, win a war that they didn't even start, that they were outnumbered against, and then create their own state, and it's the prosperous state. Nothing could have prepared me. No amount of research or interviews I've watched prepared me for like going to Israel and like seeing reality with my own eyes. Because I was still like, I was like, wow, this is Israel. Like people here are just, Tel Aviv is the most amazing, progressive liberal city I would ever, I would say in the world, where I actually felt safe. And it's not like LA or New York even, or other like progressive liberal cities. I um i really saw the fruits of the religion there, not because everybody is religious, but it's just like the fruits of it. Like I would never live in an Arab or Islamic country. I just won't, because I know what it's like to be Muslim. I know it, despite the fact that they tell you, no, women are elevated in Islam. That's not true. That's not what I see, you know? And so, yeah, it's just like, it was really a journey to just like see it with my own eyes, like going to Israel and seeing the truth of it, like firsthand, the evidence, like you said. And it only confirmed why I'm on this side. Like
You said some lovely things about the Jewish people both
Uh,
today and previously, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for that, as I have seen other interviewers do as well. You have no idea how what a relief it is for us to conduct such dialogues. I must tell you, like you said in one of your interviews, you said I can't even explain the resilience of the Jewish people. I
yeah,
don't get but somehow they keep coming back.
yeah.
And that is just so appreciated, Diane. Thank you so much for that. Really,
Well, I mean, I'm just observing, and that's what I'm seeing.
I
And
know.
in a way, it's helping me like find myself even more. Like, what is it in me that's resonant to the Jewish collective? Like this resilience that they show, this intellectual like conversations that I have with the Jewish people. Like even going to Israel, I felt like my brain was activating because of the conversations. I just feel like they didn't have time for BS. It was like, you've got rockets overhead. It's like life is short. Let's get to the point. Let's talk about this. It was fun for me. And I've never really had that experience before, not knowing a single Jewish person in my life. And like completely being exposed and immersed into the Jewish collective and thought. And I mean, the one of the biggest religion, well, actually, the biggest religion in the world is Christianity. It's by a Jewish man. Even Karl Marx was a Jewish man who was kind of misguided, and his children committed suicide. Anyway, so, but I feel like the Jewish people really make a big impact in the world, and it's like they make the world go round, actually. And sometimes, when people ask me like, "Don't Jews rule the world?" and I would say to them, "I wish they did. I really wish they did."
That's a
uh,
great line. I've never heard that. That's great.
yeah, because
Yeah,
then,
somebody said about the Oscars last night. If the Jews are running Hollywood, they're certainly not doing a great job of
yeah,
it because of the anti-Semitism that comes out of there. But your
yeah,
line is a great line. I love that. Let me ask you this: there is a Torah portion, and sometimes you'll speak about Torah portions. You said a lovely thing about Isaac and Ishmael coming
mm,
together to bury their father Abraham, and that gives you hope for the future
hmm,
because what the stories that you see in the Torah, that energy seems to be repeating
hmm,
itself throughout as we move forward, and that was a beautiful thing to hear. By the way, it's called the Devar Torah. That's words of Torah.
mm,
But there is a parsha, there is a portion where Balak, a prophet, not a very nice prophet, he tries to destroy the Jewish people, and God doesn't let him do so. And ultimately, at the end of the parsha, he gives a blessing to the Jewish people.
mm,
And a lot of the rabbis discuss that. And essentially, the consensus is that when someone from outside the neighborhood sees you and comes in and gives you a blessing because they appreciate who you are, sometimes that blessing can be even greater than
mm.
getting it from your family, your friends, your community. So, my question succinctly is, and you've talked a bit about this already, is when you come into our neighborhood and you see who we are, in a nutshell, who are we? Who are the Jewish people?
God's children, no, the chosen ones. And I don't mean that in an arrogant sense at all. I just feel like the chosen ones is not a glamorous thing. It's a very, very sacred honor to be able to be the sacred mirror for the world to show the world. And I always say this, where the Jewish people are a sacred mirror to show the world where evil is still festering in our hearts. And this is a very sacred um, job, you know. And I understand now where that, why that term is the way it is. And I don't know actually where it comes from. I just hear it around, but if I really tune into it, it's, the holders of truth and life. What I saw in Israel was people celebrating life. That's what it was. Um, and the intellectual prowess of the Jewish people, they're in search for truth, and that's, to me, that's what's important right now, especially in this journey, in this part of my journey. Truth and life is kind of my orientation.
Do you feel like a Jew?
I sometimes feel like I'm a Jewish soul. Like, people always tell me that you seem it's like you're a Jew. Like I'm like, yeah, in every sense of, I think the word. I don't know what it's like to be Jewish externally. I don't even have any percentage of Jewish in my DNA. But I feel like I get it. I get the Torah. I see the Torah as kind of like a living, I call it a living light code. Um, I don't even know what that means, but that's just what I call it. And I see that there's like the values that we hold so dear in our Western societies was based on Judeo and then ultimately Christian values. It's like, the reasons why we have moral code, the reasons why we have order is because of Jewish law, actually.
Yes.
And so I feel like there's so many things taken for granted by the world, and they just want to blame everything on the Jews because they don't have the courage to confront themselves and see what that blame that they're projecting towards the Jewish people is ultimately about. And I can give you a hint. It's like self-hatred, self-loathing. Everything they accuse Jews of is what they're guilty of. There's a lot of truth in that statement on a spiritual level and a psychological level. So,
I'll tell you a very interesting thing. I teach some conversion classes,
mm,
and I'm fascinated by why somebody would convert. And I spend most of the class asking the participants about their lives and how they arrived at that point of converting to Judaism. I said, "Wow, there, spiritual sparks must fly when you enter the mikvah, which is like a spiritual bath that they ultimately have to go to."
mhm.
And the response is usually, "No, no, 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 no. It's not like that at all." I said, "How's that?" They said, "The reason why we converted is because we felt like we were coming home."
Mm.
In other words, in their soul, there was always this belief, conscious or otherwise, that they were Jewish, right?
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. I'm not trying to convert you here. Maybe I am. I don't know.
Well, I love Israel. Like I feel like I feel at home. I feel at home with the Jewish people now. Like I feel like, I could sit in a room full of Jewish people at a Shabbat dinner and feel at home. Like I love the intellectual stimulation. I love the conversations. I love how deep it gets, even if it's nothing is casual.
No, no, that's very true. That's well said. Nothing is casual at all. No,
Yeah, and I love it.
it's like pass the ketchup. Well, what is ketchup? What do you mean by ketchup?
Yeah,
I
I
want to
love
ask you
it.
something, Diane, as in terms of your worldview, your understanding of life, where you've come to at this point. Are we going to be okay? Jewish people going to be
Yeah,
okay?
if the pattern is correct, yeah. I really do believe that. I mean, I always say the Jewish people come out on top. Like I'm siding with them because they're being bullied. They're the underdog, right? But it's like and from my eyes, they're the underdog. And but they always come out on top. And I know it. Like I know this is like a truth that I know deep inside. This is not intellectual. It's just I have this really like peaceful feeling, inner peace when I think about it. Like a real assurance that resides deep in my heart that tells me they are going to be okay. Like like whatever's happened in history, it just shows me like a very clear pattern that there's going to be this is sparking. There's a reason why Israel is in a magnifying glass. Like there's a reason why you say the word Jew and people react to it. There's something there, I think, that helps us evolve, even though it's not apparent now because there's so much happening. But I feel like this is just another one of those stepping stones in human evolution, even that we have to undergo to like get to the next level, so to say. So I do think that that's why I hold the Jewish people really high in my pantheon of beliefs here because I know they have a sacred purpose, and I don't even it's still revealing itself to me. So I can't even tell you what that is, except I know that they're a sacred mirror. I know that they embody the scapegoat archetype for a reason. Um, but there's more to it. Like I said, I've discovered that they have this creator template where they're able to overcome the victimhood, their actual victimhood. It's not a made up victimhood, their actual victimhood, and transform it into empowerment. And that's probably why I resonate with it so much and I understand the process, because that's what an alchemist does. They transform.
Yeah,
So,
they rub yellow and orange together and they get gold, right?
yeah,
That's what they do.
yeah.
I want to give you a great big hug, Diane. A great big hug. Really, thank you.
Thank you. You're
Um, I
welcome.
oh, it's been a wonderful interview. I appreciate it so much. I've gone to AI over the last few months, asking it to create an ode to poems about my guests, and I have a poem about you. It's called "The Longest Journey."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, here it goes. In the Philippines, where ocean winds and church bells blend, a child was raised in sacred halls where faith was taught to mend. In Catholic pews, she bowed her head and learned what she was told of heaven high and ancient truths and stories long and old. Yet questions stirred within her heart that rituals couldn't still. A quiet voice that whispered there was deeper truth and will. When life then led her westward to California's open skies, her soulful search began to ask the deeper how and why. She turned to breath and discipline as if her life relied. Through yoga, she calmed the storms she held inside. Then, through Kundalini's rising flame, she learned to heal the heart. Yet, even light could not explain the shadows tearing her apart. Her path then led through mystic prayer and desert winds of calm, where she embraced the sacred words within Islam's Psalms. Among the rebel seekers, dreamers shaping counterculture lands, she heard of Israel only through condemning stands. But one day truth appeared through tears she could not disregard. A grief filled voice she trusted shook the story she had heard. So she began to read and watch, to question and to learn, and slowly saw the narrative begin to twist and turn. She saw a nation small yet strong, determined still to live, a people bound by history with little room to give. Then came the horror shaking hearts across the earth that day, the brutal October 7th attack's violent display. From Mexico, she watched as voices cheered online and knew that truth was fading in the noise of every side. So now she speaks through storms arise whenever truth appears, for silence feeds the mist that flourish most in fear. Having walked through Israel twice and seen it with her own eyes, a vibrant, complex nation living under watchful skies. And somewhere in her winding path, one truth became well known. The longest journey we will make is finding truth on our own. And that's you.
Wow.
That's you. What do you think of that? It's nice, isn't it?
It's amazing.
That,
Amazing.
that's you, Diane. You're a lovely
Oh,
soul. You really are.
thank you. I love how you started with who are you? And then you're like, here's a poem about you.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Exactly.
Amazing.
I mean, that's the essence of what I try to accomplish in my interviews. I really want to get to the core of a person's soul,
Mm,
and some people are able to do that. Some people know themselves really well, and others not so much. But you've done a really great job in this
thank
interview, and I
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Um, in conclusion, if people would like to do some healing work with you, where can they
Mhm.
find you?
Yeah, they can find me on my website, iamtheportal.com. Not me, the portal. It's kind of like a play on words. Iamtheportal.com. So it reminds them that they're the portal of, their own soul expression. And that's where I house all of my healing work, my workshops. I have one coming up for, it's very short notice, but I have one coming up for a method that I developed myself that I'm going to teach people how to, heal themselves, etc. And I also have an online community that I'm trying to build called the Sovereign Sanctuary,
Mm,
where, there's a lot of people who see the truths that I see. They just don't know who else to tell it to because
yeah.
we're very rare apparently. And so I want to create this community, invite more people into my community, and yeah, and decipher these distortions together in the collective, because there's going to be more of it. I think 2026 is 2026. What year is it? I sometimes forget, but it's going to be a really interesting year. um so like I said, it's a journey, and the Jewish people are definitely part of it. They're a catalyst, and they're doing what they need to do. What from what I'm seeing, like sometimes Jewish people are like, am I doing the right thing? Should I speak out more? Do what you are meant, like do what you feel to do, because I feel like doesn't even matter what kind of Jew you are, like left or right, progressive, conservative. It doesn't matter. The Jewish people are doing what they need to do in order to like help transform whatever this is, what's happening, the world turning upside down. It's like all part of it. Like they're doing exactly what they're meant to do. That's how I see it.
Thank you.
So,
I am the portal, oneword.com,
mhm.
and I suggest really strongly that you go visit it and get a stronger sense of what Diane's work is all about.
Thank
I think
you.
I'm going to, Diane. I think I'm going to be in touch with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Work through some stuff. I'd love to do
It'll
that.
be fun.
Yeah,
I
that'd
make
be
it
fun.
fun.
You better.
Yeah, I make the darkness fun. I always tell people it's like a 2-hour movie inside your own head. So,
It's interesting. You may want to put it another way. When I was studying Leonardo da Vinci, he had eight
mhm,
rules, I think, that he carried with him
mm,
throughout the day and in his life, which helped him understand his world and his life. One of which was to embrace confusion, right?
mm,
Embrace confusion. And I thought, yeah, that's great because we all go through confusion. And when you're going through it, if you can embrace it, it makes it so much more meaningful and purposeful, right?
yeah, that's actually speaking right to me right now because I,
You're confused.
um, yeah, it's just if you don't embrace it, you start to get resistance and you make it harder, to for it to fall into
Right,
place.
right,
So,
exactly.
mhm.
All right, folks, I want to thank everybody for listening and for watching. This, by the way, was recorded on March the 16th, 2026. So if you do want to join Diane's workshop, just know this is the date and you better get there quickly. Until we meet again, my mother of blessed memory used to say "Sei gesund," which is go in good health, and I wish that to everybody: physical, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. And once again, I thank my guest Diane so much for being part of this today. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun. It's probably
I
one of
did.
my favorite interviews.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thank you. So, Sei gesund, go in good health.
Thank you.